Hi, welcome to Loop Life Academy, where we help you and your family get out onto America's Great Loop with confidence and purpose. In this episode, we're going to talk about how my family got started with boating and getting out onto the loop, some of the safety considerations, because we always wonder, is it even a safe thing to do? What does it cost? How do you plan to pay for all of that? And then, are there other families out there doing the loop? Living on a boat has really been life-changing for us, and I want to give you some practical ideas about what to be thinking about as you're planning for the loop. Let's dive into it. Then there is the most dangerous risk of all, the risk of spending your life not doing what you want on the bet you can buy yourself the freedom to do it later. This is a quote by Randy Commissar, and I think it's a good reminder that retirement and health in retirement are not always guaranteed. We don't know how long we'll be on this earth, and sometimes it's worth taking a risk in order to do something now, in order to have that adventure or that experience that you're really looking forward to. And that is an attitude that I think really drove my husband, Chris, and I to go ahead and take on this adventure now with our kids. So let me give you a little bit of backstory. When I was little, and this might be similar for you too, I loved the adventure books. I loved the pirate movies. If you've ever seen Cutthroat Island, Gina Davis, the lady pirate, she's amazing. I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be on those kind of adventures. But those were a world removed from me. I did not grow up boating. I lived near Lake Michigan. We went to the beach, but boating just wasn't a thing that we did. And it wasn't something that I thought, normal people could do. I thought that was for other people. It just wasn't something that was part of our life. Something that was part of our life was camping and those kinds of adventures and traveling. And my husband got to travel too growing up and also loved those kind of adventure books. So I think that was a seed that we both had of a longing for adventure. And honestly, I think all kids long for adventure. And I think as we get to adulthood, sometimes we smother and cover up that desire. And that's something that Chris and I saw that life is not guaranteed, and we decided that we wanted to find ways to have adventure with our family and really share that quality experience together. And so as our kids got to an age where it was easier to manage and go do things, I started looking at camping again. I loved camping growing up, and it was something that I really missed. Now, Chris was not a camper. He didn't grow up camping, and so it was not something that he was super thrilled about. He would do it, but wasn't his thing. Our friends introduced us to the idea of sailing, and then they said, "Oh yeah, we're thinking about maybe getting a camper, but we're also thinking about maybe getting a sailboat." And that was kind of the record screeching stop moment of, wait a second, you could get a sailboat for kind of a similar price to a camper. And that really sent me down a new trail of, we could figure out how to sail, and then this could be a fun thing that the entire family could enjoy. And so that is how we ended up buying our first boat, a Catalina 22. It was a trailer sailor, which means we could put it on a trailer, drive somewhere, launch it into the water, and then go for an afternoon sail or a day sail. So that's how we got started, is that desire to kind of go camping, but finding a way to do it on the water. And our first sailboat was very rustic. It didn't have any amenities. It was just a little shell, and it was a great way for us to figure out that, yes, this is something that we could do as a family. So as we continued to enjoy that and learn how to sail, we eventually upgraded to a bigger boat, a Catalina 30, and that allowed us to learn some more amenities and like how to deal with a head on a boat. That's the bathroom. And how to cook in a galley. That's the small kitchen in a boat. So how to actually have lights and wiring and electronics, all of that stuff. So we kind of slowly progressed up from a small boat to a bigger boat and really started to learn that way. Now, during this time, the pandemic also happened. And so I think probably like many of you, we spent a lot of time watching YouTube in the evenings. I mean, when especially we're from Michigan, so the winters you're not going out sailing. The boat's in winter storage. And so we spent a lot of time watching YouTube. And so we would see all these sailors crossing oceans and these big adventures, and we would dream about, oh, wouldn't that be cool someday? And then one of the days I was watching YouTube, one of those evenings, I came across a channel, I think it was Distant Shores, and they were traveling with their sailboat in the French canals. And I thought, wow, that really seems cool. And I think I could do that. I'm not quite ready to cross oceans with my small children, but I could do an adventure that's maybe in canals. I wonder if there's something like that in North America. And I eventually found a small canal in Canada that you could rent a longboat or a houseboat and travel along that canal. And eventually that led me to find America's Great Loop. And what America's Great Loop is, if you haven't seen some of my other videos, that is a series of waterways that completely circumnavigates the eastern United States. So it's a way to travel around all of the eastern US completely by boat. And you are always by land. You don't have to leave land at all if you don't want to. You can always be near shore. And I thought, this sounds amazing. So I proposed this to my husband. I said, we should do the loop. And he was super skeptical. That was not, he was ready to cross oceans. I didn't think that was a practical jump. That I'm very, let's do this step by step. That's not the way he was. Big dreams. Let's go big. In my mind, if we stuck with the oversized dream, we were going to really struggle to get there. But the loop seemed very achievable. And it ended up with the pandemic that kind of pushed Chris into deciding to work for himself, allowing him to work remotely. I had already been working remotely for about a decade at that time. And it also was kind of a step towards us deciding to start homeschooling the kids. So after we wrapped up the school year during the pandemic, we decided that next fall we would start homeschooling, and we were starting to think towards this whole Great Loop adventure and thinking about, well, if we want to do this, it would be great to start homeschooling now for us so that we could kind of figure it out and have an established routine and know what's going to work for us by the time we go on the loop. And so that's kind of our progression, is these puzzle pieces started to fall into place. In addition to all of that, we started to do small trips with the boat. So with our Catalina 22, I mentioned it was a trailer sailor. We drove that up across Mackinac Bridge. We live in the lower peninsula of Michigan. We drove that across the Mackinac Bridge to the upper peninsula, launched our boat in St. Ignace, and then sailed over to Mackinac Island, which, if you've never been there, it's a historical little island that has no cars. It only has horses and bicycles, and it's a lovely place. I grew up getting to go there a few times, and it's a lot of fun. But anyways, we sailed over there as a family in our very rustic little boat. We had zero amenities. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. I think the marina had flooded, so there was no power. The cooking situation I had brought along, the little cook stove, the fuel ended up not being the right size container, so we couldn't cook on the boat anymore. We had gone sailing and some of our rigging broke. So anything that could go wrong went absolutely wrong. But we had a fantastic time. We absolutely loved it. It was exactly what we hoped for. We had an adventure and we just really loved it. And our kids were pretty small at that time too. So I think that really planted the seed of, we love cruising. And so a little bit after that, we had the Catalina 30, and we had an opportunity. I was between different positions, working some different jobs, and we were able to take a month off and traveled up Lake Michigan and just cruised for a month as a family. And that gave us a chance to see what is it like to live on board a boat for longer than a week as a family all together, and what do we like about the boat, what's a struggle, what works well for us. And we knew we could do the loop on the Catalina 30, but it would be a struggle because of the kids getting bigger, needing separate rooms, needing to be able to work and do conference calls and things like that. I needed a separate desk, and just having only the table in the Catalina 30 wasn't going to be enough. So lots of little things like that. We kind of started to figure it out. And so that progression led us to start looking for a bigger boat that had 3 cabins, had a little bit more space, had the right draft and everything that we needed. So that's how we found our current boat, our Beneteau 423. It's got 3 cabins. It's got a nav desk that we use for our office. It's got the space we need. It's really just a perfect fit for us. That's kind of our boat progression there. And that's really a good reminder that when you're looking for your boat for the loop, if you're planning on doing the loop, is not only do you need to have something that can cruise in the way you want, but you really want something that's comfortable for your family, because you're spending a lot of time living in the space, and most of your time is going to be either at anchor or on a dock, but you need a comfortable space inside. And in addition to that, if you're doing the loop, you need to think about some of the physical limitations. So what is your draft? We draft about 5 feet, and that's pretty comfortable for most of the loop. It might limit us in a few different areas, but for the most part, we had no issues with our draft. You also need to think about the air draft. That's how tall your boat is. We're a sailboat, so we're 55 feet tall, and that means for some parts of the loop, we had to take our mast down. There are a few places where the bridges can't open up or swing open, and so knowing that you need to be able to fit in those height restrictions is really important. There's the lowest bridge you'll encounter on the loop is just south of Chicago. There is a bridge that is 19 feet 6 inches most of the time. Obviously, water levels change a little bit, but that's the lowest one you have to clear. And so that's one of the places we had to take our mast down. The other is for the Erie Canal, where there is a number of fixed bridges. So making sure you're comfortable inside, but also making sure you can deal with the restrictions of the loop. Those are important to keep in mind as you shop for your boat. So that's a little bit about our story of how we got on the loop. So between discovering the loop and starting to actively plan, it was around the pandemic when I think pieces really started to move into place and we started actively moving towards the loop, and we launched on our loop. Officially, we said we started our loop May 2023, but we were moved onto the boat before that, and we were definitely preparing before that. But that gave us a few years to really make sure that we were ready, and that made the transition for us very, very smooth to move from land life to boat life because of the way we kind of progressed things to switch to remote work, homeschool, etc. And then we finished our loop within about just over a year. So we finished in August 2024, and we're still cruising. We actually really love the lifestyle, and so we're still cruising right now. But that's our story. I wanted to take a quick break from the episode to ask you about something. Are you dreaming of tackling America's Great Loop, but you're not sure how to balance it with work and family life? My course, 10 Steps to Adventure, is designed just for you and your family. We'll guide you through everything from setting goals and budgeting to choosing the right boat and managing school on the go. Whether you're just starting to plan or you're ready to take the plunge, this course is going to help you turn your dream into reality. Go to looplifeacademy.com/adventure and check it out now to get one step closer to your Great Loop family adventure. When people hear that I've moved my family onto a boat, I think the first thing that goes through their mind, even if they don't say it out loud, is that safe? You're taking your children out onto a dangerous situation. And that makes me think of this comic that I read by Sarah Steenland. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put it up on the screen. But if you're listening on the podcast, what it says is there's a friend on the dock and a boater standing on their boat. And the friend says, "Hey, I heard you're planning to sail around the world with your family, but isn't that dangerous?" And the boater says, this is what I think is a really key attitude here. He says, "Either one of us might die tomorrow. I may be swept from the deck of my boat and drowned. You could be hit by a bus on your way to work. If I succeed, I'll get to snorkel, hike, and live truly in paradise. If you succeed, you will get to work." Now, I know that not everyone's in the situation where they can just get up and leave and get on a boat, but I do think that this lifestyle can be achieved by just about anyone. It really just depends on what sacrifices you're willing to make and how you're willing to go about it. This comic reminds me why we chose this lifestyle. Yes, there are risks, but they're manageable, and the rewards of getting to do the loop are really incredible. When I think about the loop, I think about how it is low risk, high adventure. Low risk because you're always near land. You can choose to go offshore. There's the scariest part of the loop is generally what people call the Gulf crossing, where you're crossing a chunk of the Gulf, and so you are away from land. You can honestly choose not to do that and travel along the Big Bend and stay on land. But the nice thing about the loop is you've got this community around you, and you can buddy boat, and you can talk about weather with each other and make sure you have the best window to have a comfortable and safe trip. And in addition to that, you've also got there's a lot of practical safety measures. Taking boating classes, that's a must. You absolutely need to take boating classes so you know how to not only use your boat, but how to be safe around other people, know how they should and how you should respond in the event of a collision course or an emergency, how to use your radio. All of these different things are taught in boating courses, and you should get those certifications that give you the confidence to behave appropriately on the water. In addition to that, you've also got practical things like life jackets and EPIRBs and different things that you need to have, like flares. What do you need in an emergency? How do you be safe on a boat? So knowing what you should have, what's a requirement from the Coast Guard, and how to use those things, those are easy. Like it's all right there for you, and it helps make you extra safe to make sure that if there is an actual emergency, you know what to do and you have the equipment you need on board. So those are all really practical. And then the most practical and easiest thing is watching the weather, choosing the right weather windows. So there is a phrase, never sail to a schedule. And what that means is if you are on a schedule and you have to get to a certain place by a certain date, you may be forced into making poor decisions that will put you out in bad weather. And there's no reason for that. You should really sail based on what the weather is doing. And that can allow you to really just choose the safest and best windows to have not only a comfortable ride, but a safe ride. When people ask, is it safe? The loop especially, it's very safe. There's a lot of practical steps that can make it so that it is low risk. The next big question that people come up with is, how much does it cost and how in the world do you pay for it? We've had people ask if we're just independently wealthy. We're not. We have to work full time, and that's how we pay for it. Let's first think about some of the costs. Like what do you need to spend? And there's a wide range of costs that you can have. Just depends on what you're willing to spend. So first off, you've got the cost of the boat. What you're willing to spend on the boat and what you need for comfort and size, that's all up to you, but know your boat budget. Maybe you already have a boat. In addition to the boat cost itself, you've got insurance and things like that, but you also need to think about maintenance. So this should be budgeted about 10% of your boat's value. Set aside 10% each year of how much your boat is worth. That's about how much you're going to need to spend for maintenance. So that could be for engine repair, bottom paint, replacing old parts, anything like that. So plan on roughly 10% each year based on your boat's value. You also need to think about fuel and dockage. Okay, fuel is going to depend on what kind of boat you have and what its gallons per hour rate is. So know some of those things about how fast and how much fuel does it consume. We consume very little on a sailboat. We consume about 1 gallon per hour. On a bigger boat, a faster boat, that's probably different. So the amount of fuel you need is going to vary. You can use that gallons per hour then to do some calculations and think about how much you'll be driving each day, how far you'll be going, and then start to do some rough napkin math on what would that cost based on current fuel prices. You also need to think about your dockage. If you're going to be staying at marinas, they can vary. Some places you might find occasionally $1 a foot. Now, when you're at a marina, most of the time they're charging you based on the length of your boat. Our boat is 43 feet long. And so when we go to a marina, they'll say, how long is your boat? We'll say 43 feet. And then they'll take that and they'll multiply their cost per foot. And that's how much it costs per night. Okay, so if it's $1 a night, which is on the very cheap end, then it's $43 per night for our boat. On the very extreme end, you might find as much as $8 a foot. That doesn't happen in very many places. That's going to be the very high end places, but that is a cost in some areas. what you're probably going to average, what we see most often, is around $3 to $4 a foot. If you want to figure out a budget, if you're planning on being at marinas almost every night of the year, then figure, 365 days times $4 times the length of your boat. That is probably a high estimate of your average cost for the year. Now, you don't have to be at a marina all the time. There are occasionally free docks. There are sometimes mooring balls. Those can also be cheaper. And there's also anchoring. There are anchorages everywhere. My family prefers to anchor. It's more comfortable for us, and it's also very cheap because you don't pay anybody. You just drop the anchor, and that's where you are. So just kind of depends on what your preference is and how much that's going to cost, okay? The other main cost you need to think about is really dependent on your lifestyle preference. Do you like to eat out every night? I mean, you're out boating, it's kind of exhausting, and you maybe don't feel like making dinner. We like to eat out every once in a while, but most of the time, we cook our own food here in the galley on the boat. So depending on what you prefer, you may either have restaurant costs every night or on a regular basis or grocery bills. So our grocery bill is about what it would be on land. Now remember that different regions are going to have different grocery prices, so they may be higher or lower than you're used to. You may try to rely on Instacart in some areas where it's a little bit too far to walk to the grocery store. So your costs could vary a little bit, so keep that in mind. But for the most part, plan on your groceries being similar to what you pay in your land life. Then the next big question is, how in the world do you afford it? I mentioned before the way Chris and I afford it is we still work. He runs his own business. I had been working full-time as a software engineer, and more recently I run my own business now as well. That allows me a little bit more flexibility. So that's how we make this work, is we are self-employed and work remotely. You could also, like many loopers, wait for retirement. Now, if you are younger, retirement, remember, living that long and having the right health for that, that's not guaranteed. So that's why we chose to go younger. So you may need to explore other options, like, can you take a sabbatical? Can you save up your vacation time to have longer periods? I know there's one recent gold looper that they saved enough vacation time to travel the loop rather quickly, but they were able to travel the entire loop during vacation time. Then they went back to work, and now they're stocking up vacation time to do it again. There are some families especially who will travel during summer breaks from school. So they'll get, 2 to 3 months of travel time at whatever section of the loop their boat is currently at. And it'll take them several years, but that's a very viable way to do the loop. Or even just like if you have all your vacation, use it up all at once and get a month in here and there to do sections. So that's another way. You could also just figure out how to live very frugally, be very budget conscious, do some very careful planning. So that might involve selling your house if you have a house, or saving up for a little while and then just knowing how you're going to continue to get enough money to keep going. But there are ways to do it. So just depending on what situation you're in and how you're willing to manage your lifestyle, you have some different options for how you might fund a trip like this. The last big question that we get, because we're a family on the loop, is how do you meet other families? Are there other families out there? Our experience has been a little bit different based on where we are. So if you're doing the loop and you're part of the AGLCA, then there is a group in the forums for families to help families get connected and maybe at least be able to bounce questions off each other. Our experience is there aren't a ton of families on the loop concurrently, and often based on whatever our schedules need to be, either based on work or deciding to stay somewhere longer, we're never really, in our experience, we hadn't been traveling with other families. So getting to see other kids meant going to playgrounds and libraries and just getting to meet kids that were there and having playtime that way. We also keep in touch with cousins back home. We use video calls, and my kids have a regular Minecraft day with their cousins where they have the whole afternoon to play Minecraft together on video calls. That's a great way for them to keep in touch with friends back home. But meeting kids in person on our loop, it was mostly libraries and playgrounds. Now, we've discovered kind of late in our loop this group called Kids for Sale. That's SAIL, not SALE. But anyways, Kids for Sale is a group that's all about families that are cruising, not necessarily loopers, but cruising families. And we found, especially as we've been traveling the East Coast this summer and fall, now that we've finished our loop, is there are a ton of family boats out here. So being part of that group and then using the app called No Foreign Land, we've been able to very easily find kid boats now. And that's been really very wonderful for us. When we were in Portsmouth we were there for about the Halloween time, and we ended up hanging out at the anchorage, and a bunch of kid boats showed up. And because of Kids for Sale, they got in touch with us and they said, hey, we're coordinating a trip to the park on this day. Do you guys want to join us? And then they also coordinated trick-or-treating with the boats in the anchorage and then going into town and trick-or-treating there. So we all had our time in the dinghies, going from boat to boat, which was a lot of fun in the costumes, and then heading to shore together. And a big group of, I think, 13 kids and 8 adults or something like that. We were all tromping through Portsmouth, had a great time. So there are communities out there. It's just a matter of doing the work to find them and then being willing to make adjustments to be in the same place as them. So the great thing is you are never alone out there. The boat community in general is super welcoming, super helpful. If you need something, there are people there that are happy to help. And then if you're a family, there are cruising families out there. It's just a matter of taking that extra step to find them. Okay, so that was an overview of really the main questions I get when people are wondering about doing the loop themselves or as a family. And so a quick recap is we talked about how me and my family got started and the progression that was for us with not only learning how to boat, but then also transitioning land-based life, like normal jobs and normal school, into something that was more nomadic friendly, like homeschool and remote work. We talked about the safety of an adventure like this. Is it safe? Is it something you can go out and do without, putting your children in certain peril? How much does it cost? How in the world do you pay for it? Talking through a few of the ideas there and some of the things to start thinking about. And then how do you meet other families? Are there other families out there? So living on board doesn't have to be just a dream. This is doable for families who take the time to plan well and are willing to embrace the adventure and maybe some challenges that you need to overcome in order to make this happen. If you're curious about doing this kind of a trip yourself, leave a comment below, especially if you're on YouTube. I check those comments and I do respond to those. So ask me questions. Let me know if you are wondering about what boat life is like or some of the steps that you might need to take to get your family ready to go out onto the loop or your own adventure. Before I go, I want to leave you just with one more quote that I thought was really helpful and kind of inspiring. And it's this quote from Alastair Humphreys. It goes like this: "It is a mistake to defer living adventurously until you are clear about a master plan or until the time is perfect. Neither exists." Take that as an encouragement that you're never quite fully ready. You can't wait for everything to be perfect. This is an adventure that I think if you get enough pieces in place, jump in with both feet, it is a life-changing experience, not only for me and my husband, but also for my kids. It's been highly worthwhile, and I would love to help you get there. I hope this was helpful, and thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Have a great one. Bye, everyone. If you're inspired to start planning your own family Great Loop adventure, be sure to check out our other resources at looplifeacademy.com and stay connected for more tips, stories, and inspiration. Until next time, happy looping.